Hi everybody. I became gluten-free about 3 years ago, and one thing I really missed when it came to desi food was parathe. I had a really hard time finding something that I liked, and the traditional rolling and stuffing never worked, as well as being able to just roll it out and pick it up. I didn't like oat flour and things like that, so after playing around with a lot of different options and flours, I absolutely love this way of making it. So I really like to boil the potatoes and not microwave them so that they retain some of that moisture. And then once they're completely cooled, I like to shred them instead of crushing them with my hands using a box grater, but you can of course just crush them with your hands. So this is paratha masala I got from Gujarat a couple of years ago. This lady made it fresh, so I brought home a couple of bags, and that mortar and pestle is actually my husband's grandmother's that I took from Gujarat when I went to visit his house. So you can use, honestly, I would just open my masala dabba and throw whatever is in there, but there are pre-made paratha masalas that you can buy online and at your Indian grocery store as well. So I threw some of that in there. And then the rest of the seasoning is really just what you prefer. So there's some salt, some coriander powder, and some red chili. This is rice flour. I really like the combination of rice flour as well as gluten-free all-purpose flour. The rice flour gives it a really nice crunchy texture. I learned that from my mom. We also do that for our aloo tikkis. Adding a little bit of rice flour will give it a really nice crisp texture. This is the gluten-free flour I use. I like all-purpose versus cake flour. This brand is from King Author. There's really no exact science. You really just have to see how much water is in the potatoes and kind of play with it to get a nice texture, and you'll see what that looks like. I had chopped some onions and some cilantro. If you wanted to eat it with onions as well, then just chop a couple of extra onions and you can serve it on the side once they're all done. You can also add green chilies. I didn't want to go too heavy on the spice since my daughter would be eating it as well. I'm also just wearing a glove since it's easier to add different flours and things like that, and I don't have to wash my hands every 5 seconds. So I first start to incorporate the flour just with my hands and mixing it with the potatoes to see how much water I'm really going to need once the potatoes let out their moisture. And then just play with it, continue to mix it, adding a little bit at a time. So it's going to start to form a ball, and then you want to be able to pat it and spread it out while it still holds its shape. You're never really going to be able to roll it out completely, but just so it holds its shape. Then you want to go ahead and give it a taste. Once you know texturally it's okay, adjust your seasonings accordingly. So I have a really large parchment paper. It's a baking style parchment pan paper. You can just obviously cut your regular parchment paper or baking paper at home. And you want to flour it with some of that same all-purpose flour, the gluten-free flour. You don't want these to be very big or very thick, since you want to be able to transport them easily, and you'll see some tricks that I do. So you want to make sure it's pretty heavily floured on the bottom. You want to start to manipulate it with your hands at first, get the flour on top as well. You can fold it over, or if you had the two pieces, you'd lay your other piece on top and then begin rolling it out. You want to keep checking, making sure that it's not sticking too much and the flour isn't away from the top. If you are keeping the batter in the fridge, the next day it will be more moist. You will need more flour added to it so that it doesn't stick to the paper. So I'm shaking off the excess flour here, and you can see that the paratha is already moving, so it's nice and loose. I don't have to flip it over or check if it's going to stick to the parchment. I'm adding ghee here. You can add vegetable oil or avocado oil, any oil of your choice if you wanted to make this vegan. You could also add cheese and make them aloo and cheese paratha. Then it would not be vegan. So I use the parchment to just lift it off the pan. And while that's going, I prepare my next one. You want the pan really nice and hot. And they do cook for quite some time. So go ahead and roll the next one out, but don't get too many going at the same time. If you are going to do multiples, then I would recommend having 2 pans at once, because if you roll it out and it sits for a while, it will stick to the parchment. If it does stick to the parchment, you want to just take the other parchment, flip it over, and go ahead and release one side. And since there is quite a bit of flour still on the paratha, you do end up using a decent amount of ghee or oil to kind of make it crispy and get rid of that floury look, but you obviously don't have to. In between, since it does cook for quite some time, I would recommend wiping your pan after 1 or 2 of them to make sure that the flour doesn't burn. You could also make these and freeze them. If they're cooked completely, you could just freeze them as is. I don't know that I would recommend just rolling them and freezing them, since they would probably stick to the parchment as they defrost. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, and subscribe. Oh yeah, don't forget to hit the bell icon. Thanks for watching.